Belize, a beautiful Caribbean nation nestled in the midst of Central America, is home to over 350,000 people and comprises an area of over 8,867 square miles of plains, mountains and lush forests. The country is bordered on the north by Mexico, the west and south by Guatemala, and the east by the Caribbean Sea. Since the late 1800s, Belize's borders with Mexico and Guatemala have been marked with the placement of 3 visible concrete monuments. The first border monument is located to the north at Aguas Turbias and defines the point of convergence between Belize, Mexico and Guatemala. The second border monument is located to the west at Garbers Falls and represents the midpoint of the nation's border with its neighbor Guatemala. The third border monument is located to the south at Gracias a Dios and is the most southwesterly point of Belize. These important monuments have withstood the test of time for over 100 years, when Belize was formerly known as British Honduras, a territory of the United Kingdom. Since the early 1800s, Guatemala and Great Britain sought to establish a border agreement which would define the boundaries of British Honduras. This agreement, formerly known as the Anglo-Guatemalan Treaty, was signed in 1859 between Her Majesty the Queen of the United Kingdom and the Republic of Guatemala. An extract from the Anglo-Guatemalan Treaty outlines the details of Belize's borderline. And it reads, "The Convention between Her Majesty and the Republic of Guatemala relative to the boundaries of British Honduras, signed on the 30th of April, 1859. Whereas the boundary between Her Britannic Majesty's settlement and possessions in the Bay of Honduras and the territories of the Republic of Guatemala has not yet been ascertained and marked out, Her Majesty the Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland and the Republic of Guatemala being desirous of, with a view to improve and perpetuate friendly relations which happily subsist between the two countries, to define the boundary aforesaid, have resolved to conclude a convention for the purpose and have found it good and in due form have agreed upon and concluded the following articles. Article 1. It is agreed between Her Britannic Majesty and the Republic of Guatemala that the boundary between the Republic and the British settlement and possessions in the Bay of Honduras, as they existed previous to and on the 1st of January 1850 and have continued to exist up to the time, was and is as follows. Beginning at the mouth of the River Sarstoon in the Bay of Honduras and proceeding up the mid-channel thereof to Gracias a Dios Falls, then turning to the right and continuing by a line drawn direct from Gracias a Dios Falls to Garbers Falls on the River Belize, and from Garbers Falls due north until it strikes the Mexican frontier. It is agreed and declared between the high contracting parties that all the territory to the north and east of the line of boundary above described belongs to Her Britannic Majesty, and that all the territory to the south and west of the same belongs to the Republic of Guatemala. Subsequently, after the treaty establishing the boundary between British Honduras and the Republic of Guatemala was signed, commissioners from both countries were appointed to erect visible structures that would signify points along their mutual border. Over time, these border points were reinforced. Once again, the construction of more permanent concrete pillars, each standing approximately 5 feet high and 2.5 feet in diameter, and a diplomatic exchange of notes whereby both parties in Britain and Guatemala acknowledged the borders of Belize. The first issuance of these exchange of notes was drafted on 25th August 1931 by British Legation H.A. Grant Watson to Guatemala's Foreign Minister A. Skinner Clee. It reads as follows. Your Excellency, the boundary between British Honduras and the Republic of Guatemala was laid down in the Convention between the Republic of Guatemala and Her Majesty the Queen of Great Britain and Ireland, signed at Guatemala on the 30th April 1859, Article 1, Paragraph 2, of which the line as, beginning at the mouth of the River Sarstoon in the Bay of Honduras and proceeding up the mid-channel thereof to Gracias a Dios Falls, then turning to the right and continuing by a line drawn direct from Gracias a Dios Falls to Garbers Falls on the River Belize, and from Garbets Falls due north until it strikes the Mexican frontier. It was further stipulated by Article 2 of the Convention that Her Britannic Majesty and the Republic of Guatemala shall, within 12 months after the exchange of the ratifications of the present convention, appoint such a commissioner for the purpose of designating and marking out the boundary described in the preceding article. Such commissioners shall ascertain the latitude and longitude of Gracias a Dios Falls and of Garbets Falls, and shall cause the line of boundary between Garbets Falls and the Mexican territory to be opened and marked, whereas a protection against future trespass. In consequence, joint commissioners were appointed in 1860 for this purpose, who marked in situ the position of the terminal points of the southern section of the boundary, namely Garbet Falls and Gracias a Dios Falls. However, the full survey of the frontier was not completed at that time. The governments of the United Kingdom and Guatemala are now desirous of completing the demarcation. As a first step towards this purpose, commissioners were reappointed who met on the Sarstun River on the 16th January 1929 and who proceeded to inspect the terminal points of the southern section of the frontier. They inspected the concrete monuments on the north bank of the Sarstun River at Gracias a Dios, 900 yards upstream from the mouth of the Chacon branch. On the 22nd January 1929, they inspected the piles of stones on either side of the Belize River at Garbets Falls, erected by the Joint Commissioners in 1861. They decided to accept these marks as indicating the exact position of the two terminal points. The marks were then replaced by new concrete monuments, erected under the supervision of the Commissioners. The monument at Garbets Falls being placed on the southern side of the river and the former pile of stones being demolished. The work both on the Belize and the Sarstun Rivers was duly recorded in a report signed by the said Commissioners at the Sarstun River on the 29 May 1929, of which I have received an original signed copy. I have the honor to inform Your Excellency that I am authorized by His Majesty's Government in the United Kingdom to confirm on their behalf and in accordance with Article 3, Paragraph 3 of the Convention, this report as set forth in the accompanying copy, duly certified by me, to accept the concrete monuments erected by the said Commissioners as correctly marking the terminal points aforesaid, and to state that they would be glad to receive a similar assurance on the part of the Government of Guatemala. The present note and Your Excellency's reply will constitute the agreement between the United Kingdom and Guatemala in the matter. Signed, H.A. Grant Watson. In their response dated 26 August 1931, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Guatemala, A. Skinner Klee, submitted the following. Your Excellency, I have the honor to acknowledge receipt of your note on the 25th instant. The Government of Guatemala agrees to accept the concrete monuments erected at Garbets Falls and Rapids of Gracias a Dios, which were set up by the Commissioners of both governments. Engineers Fernando Cruz and Frederick W. Brunton on the 8th and the 26th May 1929 on the frontier between Guatemala and British Honduras, according to the report drawn up at the Sarstun River Bar by both delegates on the 29th day of the same month. A copy of the report duly certified is enclosed herewith. These monuments, thus determined, form part of the boundary line between British Honduras and the Republic of Guatemala. Signed, A. Skinner Klee. And so it was that British Honduras had established its terrestrial borders with these two important international agreements and the concrete monuments that were purposefully positioned between the two nations. As a result, it was inherently established that responsibility came with securing those borders. International borders tend to serve several distinct purposes. 1. Protection and ownership of that which is within. A country is able to identify, manage and control land, water, or aerial space if it falls within the boundaries of its borders. This is important because nations can ensure that natural resources, wildlife and habitats found in those areas are protected. Laws can be drawn as to how the area is to be managed, and plans can be made as to how the area may be used. 2. Prevention of that which is harmful from entering. A country is able to restrict via the boundaries of its borders anyone or anything from entering. Today, the borderline of Belize is protected by the Belize Defense Force. Alert, armed, and accurate, these soldiers are ready for whatever may come their way. The Belize Defense Force patrols Belize's terrestrial borderline from north to south. Patrolling miles of rugged terrain is very challenging and demands careful preparation and planning. Even the smallest mistake can prove severe for these men and women. Providing that all logistics have been carefully worked out, these soldiers can expect only a few difficulties along the way. An average patrol may be between 3 to 6 miles long over rugged terrain with full gear. And when moving from one location to the next, soldiers can cover over 18 miles. These patrols are carried out regardless of the terrain and weather. Unfortunately, weather conditions aren't always favorable, and bad weather conditions add to the difficulties experienced. Heavy rain pouring down from dark clouds or intense heat spreading across the forest is to be expected on any given day. Each soldier must be equipped with the proper equipment and gear. They must be prepared to walk through thick vegetation and over obstacles along the path. Despite the many challenges at hand, they march forward shoulder to shoulder. But do these soldiers patrol all of the 170 miles of Belize's terrestrial border with Mexico and the 165 miles border with Guatemala? The answer is yes. The entire border is patrolled by air, rivers by boat, and land by our soldiers. But what all does it take to build a soldier? What type of training and special skills are required for them to professionally and accurately fortify Belize's borders? In our next episode, we look at the men and women who spend their everyday lives doing just that. Tune in next time as we continue our journey in discovering Belize's border patrol guards, the Belize Defense Force.